I thought I'd just start off by explaining the history of the consultant's lunch. Some 12 years ago, I decided to have lunch with a couple of guys, and at the end of that lunch, someone said, let's do it again and again and again and again. So this is about the 25th consultant's lunch. So the last one we had was in Surrey Hills, and there were about 40 people at the little restaurant we had, and we normally have one pre-Christmas and one middle of the year. So this is our mid-year one. And why we've gone for the time for a tandoori is because of my old mate Barry Dobson, who's online, who always tells me we should just go straight to Tandoori Den and not muck around with anywhere else. I've refused to do that every time, but about every second time we normally go to Tandoori Den. So we would have been at Tandoori Den in Camberwell today, but that's the way it is. So this one, whereas often we just have Victorians on board, we possibly even have some interstate people, could even be international for all I know, but suddenly the restriction was no longer there. Now, I thought I'd just share something with you to start. Let's see if I can get this working. Sue tells me I'm not very good at it, but I thought you'd...
You're not.
I'm terrible at it, I know, Sue, but I'm working on it. I'll just get worse as I get older. So this is what we did recently. I was starting to look like, I thought a bit like Albert Einstein. And anyway, my dear wife decided we needed to deal with this. So life in ISO was both myself and my dog started to look extremely scruffy. So what does my wife do? We go and buy a set of pet clippers. So $85 down at Pet Barn, we've now got the clippers. So as you can see, the dog actually went first. He wasn't happy as he ended up getting all his hair cut off. And then the wife decided she'd take it to me. So look out, that's what can happen. Probably saved us. We've saved the money of the hair clippers already. Hopefully you can see my hair's a bit better than it was looking about 2 weeks ago. So we can rent hair clippers out if anyone would like a loan of them. $10 make them available to you. Now, the other thing I just wanted to do is, just get back for a second. We are a statistical company, as you may know, our little company called Spectrum Analysis. So I wanted just to put something up a little bit COVID-y, and I know everybody's sick of COVID, but this is really an incredible story when you look at it. Because what I've done here is just brought together the numbers. You can all go to Johns Hopkins University.
Hey, excuse me, Peter. Well, what we can see in your screen is the slide of you and your haircut. We can't see the actual COVID-19 stats.
Okay, let me try that again because it told me that was what I was seeing, but let's see what I'm seeing and, okay. How's that? Am I passed? Can you see the COVID-19 stats?
No, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much for letting me know. Okay, so I just wanted to show something that starts off with Victoria. So Victoria is 6.7 million, 20,000 cases, 784 deaths. So we've basically had a case for every 3 cases per 1,000 people and 117 deaths per million people. Okay, so you can see why the rest of Australia has probably been a bit crapped off with us. Across the whole of Australia, only 872 deaths, of which 784 with Vic. So across Australia wide, we've run at about 1 case per 1,000 people, and about 33 deaths per million people. So you can even see more why New South Wales and Victoria were very, New South Wales, South Australia, Queensland, they're saying, Victoria, stay away, we don't really want to know about you. But I thought it's interesting just to look at us against some of the other countries in the world. So in cases per 1,000, the UK is running at 6.6. Remembering Australia's running at 1.0. They've had 640 deaths per million. We've been at 33.7. The United States, 21.3 cases per 1,000 people against Australia's 1. 614 deaths per million against our 33. So they've been both those countries are running at basically 20 times more the death toll than we are. As you can see, France is probably running at somewhere near 15 times. Brazil, 661. So they're probably running at best part of 20 times worse than we are. And then who believes the numbers from China? I can say no more than that. According to their numbers, they only have had 4,700 deaths across their huge population, which is 3.4. So they're actually doing 10 times better than us in deaths per million according to their numbers. So I guess the good news for Australia is, being a huge island, is this is sort of the numbers we've been running at compared to these other places running at 20 times worse. And some of you may or may not know, I actually have one son living in America and one son living in England. So these numbers here get to be a bit significant, but they're doing what they want to do. So look, I just thought I'd throw that up and show you where the numbers are sort of sitting as a Australia-wide and worldwide type numbers. Okay, I now want to just firstly thank Sue, who's I'm going to introduce, who's been fantastic to help with running this lunch. Right now she's co-host, so if I stuff it up, she fixes it up. Great way to be. Now, Sue's actually known internationally as a guru of LinkedIn, and she assists and lectures in this area. At one stage, her article on how to run LinkedIn had actually surpassed the LinkedIn Zone article. So they actually had to depower her article. So what I'm going to do is ask her if she can advise us of what is happening in this space, because she tells me LinkedIn's got some new features, some things are changing. So Sue, would you like to take it away for a couple of minutes and just give us an update?
More than happy to. Thank you, Peter, and thank you for keeping us all accountable here and buzzing away. So obviously today we're at an event of LinkedIn, and I apologise for when you see my screen that you're going to see all sorts of other things. Peter can just keep an eye on the chat. There's a question in there for you to answer, Peter, so I'll leave that to you. And the events feature is a new feature of LinkedIn. And what's really cool about this is when you register, it shows up on your left-hand menu, and you can actually see everybody who said they were coming, and you can actually go through, and if there's anybody you like the look of there, you can actually send them an invite to connect. So that's another way to network from today's event. The other thing that you may have noticed is my screen now has very much a white background. I recently signed up for LinkedIn Premium. I'm one of the first 80,000 people in the world on LinkedIn. I joined back in December 2003. And as a premium member, I've got the new interface layout that has just been launched. And one of the features that I haven't mentioned in an article I'm going to show you is now in the news feed, you can see that they're pre-preparing some little content pieces that you can add as a comment to your articles. And that's another new feature that is here. And all social media, in my view, is designed to do is get more and more people to come more and more often and to stay a lot longer. And as a management consultant, one of the reasons that's important is over 50% of the people on LinkedIn earn more than $100,000 a year. And I would suggest a lot of those people in senior level positions don't know how to use LinkedIn and are definitely not using all the features, but it's a really great way to sort of build and maintain your network. So I'm going to put this link in the chat later, but this is an article I wrote that just focuses on some of the actual new things that have appeared in LinkedIn in the last 12 months or so. And so you can go through this in your own time. I'm just going to give you sort of a quick run through right now.
Sue, did you say that this event was live on LinkedIn, or did I mishear?
Not live on LinkedIn, but it was promoted on LinkedIn as an event. So the benefit of that was that I could go through Peter's profile and invite all of his connections to join this event. And that's another really great feature of hosting an event on LinkedIn now. LinkedIn Live, you have to be approved for, and they don't approve very many people anymore because there's already quite a few people doing LinkedIn Lives. I would also argue that you're probably better off just doing your own events and recording it and putting it on YouTube anyway, because not everybody tunes into a LinkedIn Live. They've got to be on LinkedIn at that time. Yeah, so I wouldn't necessarily guarantee that you know, that's the best option anyway. But great question, thank you. So now when you are in the newsfeed, you don't just have a thumbs up, you've got all these other options. The one with a heart is, say for instance, somebody announces some bad news and you feel concerned for them. That one's a care button. There's the celebrating one, the love it, the great idea, and curious. I think Barry might use that one on a fairly regular basis, questioning the content. So that's a curious one. What you can also do now, as you can do on Instagram, is only on the mobile phone, you can produce a LinkedIn story. It only lasts 24 hours. I'm sort of a longer term person, so I did one and I've never done another one again, but I was selected by the PR agency in Sydney to be at the launch of that because I'm recognised as one of the top 10 LinkedIn experts in the Asia Pacific region for the last 2 years. So it's a new feature. If you're a stories kind of a person and you use the mobile phone a lot, definitely an option for you. One thing I really appreciate is this opportunity to speak your name. So on your mobile phone, you'll see next to your name a little record button, and you can actually pronounce your name. So instead of somebody calling me Ellson, which seems to be a common mispronunciation of my name, I can actually say Sue Ellson, and then they will hear how to pronounce my name. It's also very good for people with international names to help the person identify whether you identify as male or female. And yeah, it's just a nice personal touch. Also, what you'll notice on the company or schools profiles, you can now get a really good indication of who your followers are. So even though I'm a company of one, and my company profile has, you know, over 200 odd followers, what I can also do in here is I can now look at these analytics on my company profile and I can see who those people are, where they come from, etc. So if I go under analytics, I can see followers and I get some insights into who those people are. And then I can also, Peter, of course, one of them, and then also over on the right, I'll just move my Zoom window out the way, you can export some of that information. Under admin tools, you can invite people you're already connected to follow your company profile on LinkedIn. So that's another really cool feature. Next one on the list is invite connections. You can add the event, which we've obviously done for today, and you can also, if you're open to work, you can turn on this open to work decal. Some people call it the green scarf, so it says open to work on your profile photo. I'm personally not a fan. I think it makes you look a bit desperate. But particularly maybe for younger people, it might be a good idea to show that they're ready, willing and able. But again, not my favourite thing, but an option triggered by COVID. There's also some new features. So when you look at someone's personal profile, what you'll see on the main page is they can link, and this is particularly good for the speakers in the group, is you can link to some videos and presentations that you've done and make it a fairly strong feature, you know, right at the top of your profile in here. So that's an image, that's a video, and I've got a couple more videos in there. So that whole featured section is new on LinkedIn. The next one is you can do a skills quiz so that you can be recognised for your particular skills. And also, if for some reason you decide to have a sabbatical for 12 months, you do not need to delete your LinkedIn account. You can actually hibernate your account. And there's also a whole bunch of other settings that they've added in that you can now choose. You can also run polls in the news feed, and you can also do audio voice messaging. And if you've got a moment to check out that link, it's really funny. It's this guy called Jimmy and says, "Hi, Candace, this is Jimmy from LinkedIn. Nice to meet you." And it's absolutely hysterical. And then she sent that out as a tweet, and it was sort of say how to not leave a voice message on LinkedIn. So when you go into the normal messaging area, you see a little microphone. So if you don't want to type up a message to someone, you can just do an audio recording instead. You can also, there's this send button. So if you see something interesting in the news feed and you think this would be really important for one of your clients to see, you can send it as a message directly to them. That's new. And one feature I love to do is to save your PowerPoint presentation as a PDF. And then when you put it in the news feed, so you write a post, you add it as a document. So if you start typing in here, if you start a post, you can add in a document. So there's that little button there. And then what happens is your PowerPoint slides become like a little carousel and people can see your carousel of slides. So that can work even better than a video for sharing content. There's lots of other articles that you can also read about LinkedIn that might be helpful for you. But this is only a quick intro to some of the new features and a couple of bonus ones. So as I said, I'll pop that in the chat for you so that you can check that out later. And if anybody's got any questions they want to ask me during the presentation, feel free to put those in the chat, or you can message me. I'll just put in my email. And also, if you go to my website, on the first page of my website down the bottom, there is actually another little video that I prepared for the City of Boroondara, the local council, which talks for about 10 minutes on LinkedIn for Business, which you're welcome to check out as well. So I think I shall hand back to Peter.
Well, thank you, Sue. That's very good. We're all using LinkedIn. It's amazing how we've learned about the words like LinkedIn and Zoom that we really didn't know much about previously. Okay, what I'd like to do now is I'm going to introduce our first, I'm not going to use the word speaker, I'll call it interviewee. We decided some years ago that when you go and ask somebody to be a formal speaker, they run away at 1,000,000 miles an hour. If you invite them, it started with my son, who at the time was working in Formula One, and we said if he wouldn't come for anything, and I said, I'm just going to ask you a few questions. Well, we got him over the line. So we've stuck with that procedure. So I'm going to look for John Downs, who I can see, but maybe he can put his hand up. There he is. So John I've known for many years, but thanks very much for being a part of our virtual lunch, John. My recollection is meeting you when you're at the beginnings of BDC, Business Development Company. Maybe you can give us a quick overview of your past, including you worked for many years with Deloitte, and what you do now in your business.
Sure. Look, it's fantastic to be at another one of our consultants' lunches, and it's great to see so many people turn up virtually. So, just after I finished university, I got a job at Deloitte, Haskins and Sells, as it was called in those days, and it was a very staid accounting firm that was on the acquisition trail. And I'd done an accounting degree, couldn't count, so I thought I'd better get into IT. And that started a 25-year career there, which saw me spend 3 years in London and 2 years in Chicago. And virtually all of it was management consulting work. I finished up there as a partner just after the GFC, and left to set up a sole practitioner business that was going to be really simple and low overhead, and life was going to be really cruisy. I failed dismally at that because within 12 weeks I had 25 staff and 3 offices, so I'd recreated a small part of Deloitte. And after 2 years of that, I exited to my partners, who continue to run the business, and I set up myself as a sole practitioner. And so what I do these days is I mentor business owners, and what I like to do is to help them see and become the best that they can be. And that's, for me, is very much around how do I help them find pleasure, fulfillment, and ripping good financial reward from their business.
Oh, well, I think that's great. A lot of people are hoping to achieve those things. John, you're now the Victorian chapter president of the Institute of Management Consultants for VicTas, a role quite a few of us, I can see Stephen Lake and myself, a couple of others, Bill Pickett, have held. and maybe you can just give us an update on what's happening at the IMC.
Yeah, look, the IMC's been fairly active over the last 6 months, particularly since COVID. And we've had a fairly active webinar series, really trying to put out support to our members to help them get through the COVID scenario. In Victoria, we actually reached out to all of our members over in about month 3 of COVID to find out how they were going. And it was interesting to sort of see that about 20% were actually thriving with COVID, busier than they'd been previously. About 25% were doing about the same as they had pre-COVID, and about half were actually suffering something in the order of 10, 20, 50 or even an 80% downturn in their revenue stream. So I think that's quite typical of consultants during any sort of a major downturn, when discretionary spending gets turned off overnight. People who are involved in project work often find that sort of either comes to a grinding halt, or it certainly slows down, and then finding decision makers to play with when they're all actually working from home has certainly created some challenges. So the thing that I'm really excited about at the moment is that on the 21st of November, we have the IMC National Conference, which will be its first virtual conference. And the real focus on that is how do we actually thrive coming out of COVID, which is very much around having excellent speakers like the dynamic Dave Staunton and a number of others telling us all about how we can actually build a cracker of a pipeline and how to convert it so that we come out of this in the next 2 years really thriving.
Okay, so we've run conferences for quite a few years with the Institute of Management Consultants, as I recall. This would be, what, the 8th or 10th one that's been running?
Yeah, I imagine so, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see where I'm at. Okay, I see you as a pure management consultant. Whereas I know when I was the president, I used to feel guilty that I didn't really think I was a management consultant. You genuinely are. So what are your thoughts on the opportunities for management consultants, or people like a lot of us on this screens, in the consulting industry in general? What do you see it heading?
Yeah, look, it's been a long time since I've been called pure. So thank you very much for that, Peter. I'll let my mum know.
Okay.
Look, the opportunities for management consultants, I think, going forward are divergent. So there's a couple of things that are happening. And we've seen this repeat itself in the last 3 recessions that I've been around for and aware of. So obviously we talked about, okay, well, recessions mean that we see a downturn in demand for consulting services. What we also see, and we've actually seen, I think, something in the order of 1,200 consultants laid off by Deloitte, Ernst & Young and Accenture. I think that's right. No, actually it was PwC, not EY, in the last 4 months. But I'm also seeing Deloitte actually is acquiring consulting businesses at the moment. So it's a bit bipolar there. But what we'll actually see is that some of the large corporates will decide to actually insource their consulting services unless they need a brand to sue. So that's going to be very interesting. The other thing that we also see is that according to the IBIS World industry research into consulting at the moment, pre-COVID, they said there was about 100,000 consultants rattling around Australia. This is John Downs' personal estimate, is that by March next year, we'll probably have 130,000 management consultants rattling around Australia, because redundancies and midlife crisis changes and wondering whether they could actually run a business from home because it's been so much fun for the last 6 months, will actually swell the ranks of management consultants. So one of the opportunities for us all is to reinforce our brands, reinforce our experience as seasoned management consultants, and actually try and differentiate ourselves when we actually build up our brand by looking at things such as an unashamed plug here, being a member of the Institute of Management Consultants, which gives you the post-nominals of MIMC or FMC, perhaps becoming a certified management consultant. There's not a hell of a lot of those in Australia, but it's a globally recognised credential. And if you're an experienced campaigner, it's not particularly difficult to qualify, not because the standards are low, but because if you've been doing consulting successfully for the last decade, you'll no doubt doing everything that's required. And the other thing is to actually look at ISO 20700. And this is the certification, the international standard for management consultants. Because it's only been around for the last 2 years, there's very few people declaring themselves as ISO 20700 compliant. And after this, I'll be actually going to a training course exactly on how to get ISO 20700 compliant. So I think that one of the key things to do is just set yourself out from the pack by actually working on your brand, making sure that it's clear to your customers, but also to your soon-to-be fairly enthusiastic converters, that you are a respected management consultant. And if you're thinking about your pipeline, then come along and see Dave and a cohort of others telling us how to actually drive a pipeline post-COVID on the 21st of November.
Well, thank you. Thanks very much, John. And I'm sure if anybody, or a lot of people I can see on this, I know will be going to that anyway. And I will probably expect to be there myself. So that's great, because the IMC conferences have really been what a lot of consultants need to actually attend. Inevitably, the ones that don't go are the ones that should be there, and vice versa in a lot of cases. So thanks so much for being involved in our Consultants Lunch, and I hope to see you at many more of these in the future.
You surely will.
That's great. I'm just looking at the time, and we're coming right on to when I was going to invite Greg to speak. We were thinking of having a little breakout groups, but if you don't mind, I think we'll just keep pursuing on, and I'd rather give Greg a really good nudge here. So I'm very honoured. I've asked Greg to speak before at our IMC, at our Management Consultants Lunches, but Greg in a lot of cases is overseas. He is really one of Australia's prime international speakers, especially in the area of franchising. He is seen as the guru, and his company called Franchise Relationships Institute is seen as the guru of how do you decide where, what a franchisee should look like, and how to try and benchmark and statistically measure franchisees, obviously in Australia, but his work has gone internationally. My recollection is firstly meeting Greg early in my time at Spectrum, so about 20 years ago, and then going to Las Vegas with him in 2007. Now, great things happen in Las Vegas, as you can often imagine, to the International Franchise Association Conference. And as I recall, I think it may have been the first one you're invited to speak at. And from then on, I think he has just been an international speaker, absolutely ongoing. So what I'd like to do is welcome Greg Nathan, and I've got a couple of questions for him, but give him a pretty open go and how he'd like to discuss things with us. So Greg, thank you very much for coming on board today.
Thank you. Nice to see. I've got some good friends and mentors on the call as well, and I appreciate you guys coming on and participating. I'll give you a little background to the business first, I think, because it puts it in context. I qualified as a psychologist back in 1979. Some people may not have been born then. And I was conducting neuroscience projects at Monash University. I got a phone call from a Brumby's Bakery franchisee who I had worked for during my studies. And he asked me whether I'd like to go into business with him as a partner. He was expanding into 3 multi-unit franchises. And I'd worked for him, and he knew that I was a very good baker and a very good leader of people. And I decided, why not? So I left Monash Uni, and I kind of left psychology for a time. I I maintained my membership of the Australian Psychological Society, but I experienced life as a franchisee, and later on the head office invited me to join them, and I became the head of marketing and operations for the franchisor. Now, I'd had no formal business training, but I learned a lot about business at this time, and we floated the company. We were the first Australian franchise group to go public. But what I noticed was a constant tension in the relationship between the franchisors and the franchisees on both sides. And there was a lack of training or education programs on how to manage this. So in 1989, I merged my two areas of expertise, my psychology and my franchising experience, and founded what would become the Franchise Relationships Institute, specializing in the psychology of franchising. And our purpose has always been to create evidence-based tools and education programs that foster a profitable partnership. I've written actually a book, I'll come back to this shortly, called Profitable Partnerships, between the franchisor and the franchisees. And we're now recognized as global leaders in this space. Today, we've got a team of 15 people. We've worked virtually for the last 10 years, and our products include books. We've got surveys, proprietary surveys we've developed, assessment tools, and workshops. So that's a little bit about the business.
Just while you got there, I did see you wave that up, and I have read it years ago. So you might just talk briefly about it, because I know some of our very big franchises actually give that to the franchisee and basically say, read it before you do anything else. So how well's that gone, your book?
It's gone very well. Look, I wrote it in 1999. That was 10 years after I'd been running the business. And I wanted to pour out everything that I'd learnt previously from my own experience and my research. The word profitable partnerships came from, there was a management consultant actually in an office next door to mine. We had some shared offices, and he knew I was writing this book. I locked myself up for 3 months, and I was trying to come up with the title. And he suggested that title. I'm very grateful for him for that. That book sold 170,000 copies now, and it's all through word of mouth, and a lot of groups do buy it. McDonald's buy a lot of copies they give it out to their new franchisees. But it was back in 1999 that I thought it was a good book, and I wanted to take the business to the next stage. I had a solid reputation in Australia. I was a regular speaker at the Franchise Council of Australia conferences. And I thought, I'm going to go global. So I contacted the International Franchise Association. They're really the American Franchise Association, but they represent the largest market in the world. And I was flying over to America to speak at a client's conference over there in Virginia. So I wanted to take the opportunity to meet someone at the IFA about talking at their annual convention, but they totally stonewalled me. I couldn't get anyone to return a phone call. No one would return an email. And so I called in a favor from a management consultant in America who had been to Australia and I knew, and he was a member of the IFA. He pulled some strings and he got me a meeting in Washington, DC, a guy called John Reynolds, who was the head of the education division at the IFA. And this was quite a profound experience actually for me. I felt a little bit intimidated by America because we'd all grown up watching American shows on TV and so on. It was one of my first, I think it was my second time in the States. I walked into his office and he was hunched over his desk doing some work. He looked up, he looked at his watch and he said, I got 5 minutes. Who are you? What do you want? And then he continued to write. And so I said, well, my name's Greg Nathan. I'm a researcher and an educator who specializes in the franchise relationship. And I'd like to talk at your annual convention. And at that point, he looked up and he laughed in my face and said, why on earth would we have you at our convention? Who are you? And you're not even a member. And at that point, I lost it. And I really let him have it. And I said to him, I told you, my wife was actually sitting in the office with me and she sort of was looking quite uncomfortable. But I said to him, I just told you who I am. My name's Greg Nathan. I can't believe your arrogance at a visitor, at an international visitor who's come to offer you something valuable. And at this point, he sort of put his pen down and he looked at me and he said, all right, well, what do you got? And I explained what we did, and I agreed to become a member. And we negotiated that I would take a booth at their convention, and I would join their membership fee is 10 times the price of the Australian Franchise Association. And he would give me a round table to run at the convention. So I decided to really make an impact. I took 200 copies of this book that was just freshly printed, and I gave a copy out for free to every person who would talk to me. I shook their hand and said, I'm Greg from Australia. This is for you as a gift. I'd be interested in your feedback. I bought a guitar in Las Vegas, and I actually was playing it at the booth, and that tended to attract people over, and we had a good laugh. And also, when I ran the round table, I ran it on the psychology of how to improve your franchise relationships. It was the best attended round table out of 200 round tables in the room, and it got the best evaluations. So after that, John Reynolds sort of said to me, all right, next year, I'll let you sit on a panel. So I was on a panel with 3 other people, and I got a perfect 10 rating on the evaluations, and everyone else got 6.5 ratings, which meant that they weren't allowed to speak again, because the IFA has a benchmark. If you get rated less than 7, you're not allowed to speak again. And John Reynolds rang me, I remember, when I returned to Australia, and he said, I can't understand how you got such good ratings. How is this possible? And I controlled myself because I really wanted to say to him, I told you so. I said to him, John, look, the way I do my talks is very interactive, and the audience responds well to that. I think the other audience members were just talking at the audience, and perhaps it made them look bad, I don't know. But the next year he said, all right, I'm going to give you a workshop to yourself. And he sat in on the workshop. And after he experienced the depth of our research and our knowledge and so on, he actually became my strongest advocate. And I've been giving talks at that IFA convention for 20 years, every year since. They also invited me onto their franchise relations committee, and I ended up chairing that committee. And I think I've invested probably over $200,000 in membership fees and so on, attending those conventions, but they have laid the foundations for the next stage of our development into the USA. And we've planned to actually have a formal expansion into the US. It's an overnight success of 20 years, but next year, and I've got some help of some investors. So we're putting in a plan at the moment for that.
Yeah, fantastic. It's been a long run, but I've known how, having been there once when you were speaking, you're a star performer, no doubt. Mm-hmm. I see you as a management consultant, again, probably more than I am, as we do products. What are your thoughts on the industry in general? What's your thoughts on management consulting, especially in the sort of franchise space?
Yeah, and thanks, Dave. I noticed there's some comments coming through in the feed. So Dave Big Dave's been a great supporter of mine. I really value him being on the call today. Look, when I first opened the business, my accountant sat me down and said, I've just got one piece of advice for you. Say yes to everything. So whatever work you're offered, just do it. And then when you're in a position to start to become choosy, that's fine, but you need to get the cash flow coming in. So I did that for 5 years. And after 5 years, I could get fussy about what we took on. And it was that point I decided consciously that I would specialize. I call it a micro niche. And my advice to anyone in consulting is find a micro niche within an industry. So our micro niche was, firstly, the sector is franchising. I don't do any work outside the franchising sector. I turn it away or I refer it. And we only specialize in people issues. That was a very profound and important decision, because that enabled me to go deep, and that enabled us to build the reputation as being the best in the world at what we do. And I could hand on heart say, I think that's true. We also made a conscious decision to productize and move from being a consulting practice where we're charging our time to a business that's generating 70% of its revenue from products that are not directly dependent on me. And I think if you want to build a good reputation and leave some sort of a legacy through your work, you've got to productize and you've got to specialize. Now, the other thing that I think has been very important in the development of the business, I've always put at least 25% of my time into giving back to the industries that support me or support the business through voluntary work. It's lovely, Peter, to see the work you've done with the IMC. But my rule has always been I will not be on a committee if I can't genuinely add value and contribute. I can't stand being on committees where people are just there so they can say I'm on the committee and, you know, take up space. So you've got to do it for the right reasons. And what I've found is the goodwill that's been generated from that giving back has come back tenfold and has been very powerful in generating supporters. So Bob Peterson's on the call, and Bob was one of my first supporters. And I met Bob through a committee through the Franchise Council of Australia. It's an example of that.
Oh, okay. So specialisation's really your view, and
Micro
straight down there. That's good. At this COVID time, running a virtual business is nothing new to FRI. I understand you've run as a virtual for around 10 years now, because I remember a comment with you recently saying, not affecting us, that's exactly what we've been doing.
Yeah.
What tips can you give the rest of us who have just started this way? Because, like, you know, my business, I've got 7 people full-time. We've been in our office for 20 years, basically, and suddenly we now have, who's on the call, we have an interstate person now. We actually have gone interstate. So Melinda's up at Ballina or somewhere up there. So she's been there for months. It's going great. So what's your experience on that?
Yeah, look, the trigger for us was I wanted to move back to Melbourne. We were based in Brisbane. My father was dying and I wanted to spend that time with him. So with the support of the team, they said, we can do this. We're going to close the office down. We're all going to work from home. We lost a few at the time who were younger people who wanted more social contact. But it's worked very well for us over the last 10 years. I think respecting the needs of family is very important, not assuming you can just take over family space for meetings and so on. I think with respecting your children and your spouse and so on. I think I've noticed sloppiness in people who have started working from home. We've always maintained professional disciplines around personal presentation, around routines, I think is important. I always wear a jacket, for instance, if I'm on a client meeting, and we have a culture in our business of tidy personal presentation for all meetings. The staff have always, don't have to dress up, but they just need to, you know, look good and tidy, not sort of like they've fallen out of bed. I think most people now have realised the idea of respecting the camera and respecting the microphone. A lot of people use multiple screens and it's very disconcerting if you're like I'm doing now. Let's say I was looking at you guys there, but the camera was there. It doesn't fit with basic human psychology when you're not looking at someone, when you're not talking to them. So I think it's very important how people position their camera. Small things like making sure that your face is clearly visible. I think it is disconcerting when you're on a call and people don't have their camera on and don't explain why they don't have their camera on, because you assume that they're doing something else and they're not paying attention. So these are basic courtesies that I think you need to train your teams in and perhaps practice. I'd also recommend weekly team meetings. There are 3 questions I would recommend. One would be, how are you going really? What aspects of your work are going well? And where do you need help? So those of you who have got teams working virtually, I'd recommend those 3 questions. And I think culture is very important. We've put a lot of effort into developing a nice culture where people enjoy their work, have a bit of fun. 3 times a year, we've always got together for a few days. We've shared a house and hung out together. I know that's difficult at the moment with travel restrictions, but I think that's also been a key to the sustainability of the business.
So where would that be? Sort of Sunshine Coast or something, I guess?
Byron Bay, we often hire a big house, you know, with 10, you can hire these houses on Airbnb with 10 bedrooms and stuff. We'd all hang out, we'd cook together, we'd have business meetings, we'd do presentations, professional development for 2 or 3 days. And that was a lot of fun and very valuable.
Greg writes a fantastic blog that comes out, I'm going to say, well, every week, very regularly. And I know there was one on, you gave a very good one on, and I read it. There you go, I do read your things. About, I think it was a daily meeting you have every day, and the sort of questions you ask, and you do have quite a lot of Twitter and things between people to communicate.
The culture is actually changing. We've got some new leaders in the business at the moment, and I've had to, this is probably also an evolution as a founder of a business, and some of you may have experienced this, where I've been very close to my business and very close to my team. They've been like my family. I've had to step back the last couple of months and allow other people to run the business the way they want to run it. The emphasis on those meetings has decreased. I personally have had to sort of just, you know, go with that, see how it goes. I personally think daily contact is very important in meetings, but even if it's just 10 minutes checking in. So I think those meetings at the moment are being held 3 times a week, which is still, you know, good. But so that's, we're experimenting at the moment, because obviously when you do get people together for meetings, it does take them away from their other work. But if you're just starting out in this virtual environment, I would probably recommend a daily until you get into the rhythm, and then maybe cut it back to, you know, 2 or 3.
Well, I must say we're doing a daily meeting at 9 o'clock, and everybody's there, you know, with almost, you know, religiously, literally there, and just quick throw around what's happening.
Good discipline to start the day off formally and kick everyone off positively. Yeah.
I took that from your points.
Oh,
well, look, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with us. I'm just going to say to everybody here today, I'm sure you can find Greg Nathan very easily. And just getting onto his blogs and things like this, it's fantastic what he writes. And the other thing is there's a comedy side to Greg. Greg is a fantastic guitarist. How many guitars we got these days, Greg?
I've got 40 actually.
40 guitars. And he tells the stories of going around the world by where he's bought a guitar or lost a guitar or broken a guitar or whatever, from very good ones to very poor ones, I'm sure. But Greg's musical things have been fantastic, and he puts on a lot of little, I guess, in your blogs or on your video things.
It was interesting hearing Sue's session was very useful. Thanks, Sue. But I use LinkedIn as a bit of an outlet. So I'll sometimes post a bit of a song or a message in a song on LinkedIn with a 2 or 3 minute song, you know, guitar playing, which I find a lot of fun.
I strongly recommend, if you're not hooked onto Greg Nathan on LinkedIn, you absolutely do that, because it's a bit of comedy to make your day a bit happier as you go forward. Greg,
Peter,
thank you so much.
Sorry, Peter. Gary's got a question. If we could just throw that in before the breakout rooms.
Gary.
Unmute, yeah, thanks. When you make it back to Melbourne, the Corner Hotel opens, you can go and play there, Greg. Hey, just a quick question. Looking at franchising and franchisees, one thing and it's not just that industry, but in general, the issue of respect between franchisor, franchisee, employer, employee. My observation over the years is I think it's disintegrating, and that's part of the major problem that's out there.
Yeah, I'd agree, Gary. By the way, I thought I had Bill Clinton on the call earlier.
I've heard that before, actually.
Gary, totally agree. One of my mantras and something that I've tried to teach over the last 30 years is the essence of respect. And what's interesting over the last 5 or 6 years, it's now emerging in from the neuroscience that respect is hardwired into people's brains, the need for respect. And so I'm sort of taking that angle as well with my clients, reminding them that it's suicide not to show common respect and courtesy with your franchisees and not to build that into your culture. And if you don't do it, the government will start to step in, as it is in a number of industries, and start to try and regulate. But it's very difficult to regulate for these.
You can't. I mean, I remember an old Patrick Cook cartoon went along the lines of, you know, ours is a company of growth, but some of you have been called to serve as compost. And I thought very, very cynical, but it actually nailed it in some organisations, I thought.
That's good.
But if you don't get around that, of course, you don't get a good work environment or a productive workforce or happy lifestyle, it seems to me.
Yeah, spot on.
Okay, well, look, Greg, thank you so much for making your time available and coming on the call today. I can see a few people are clapping you, so well done. Sue, I think we might just go for a quick, you wanted to give us a quick go at small
breakout rooms. Well, obviously when you're at the Tandoori, we're all yelling over one another, but we do get an opportunity to speak one-on-one or one-on-three with a couple of other people. So we're fine for time. So you stay as long as you like in the breakout room. We'll just divide it up. It's completely random. If you're stuck for something to talk about, we encourage you to discuss what will you do differently as a result of the lockdown and the experience of COVID during 2020. So if you're stuck for a conversation topic, you can go with that one. Otherwise, you can just network away, chat amongst yourselves, or if you need to leave because it's 1:30, we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Hopefully, Peter will be able to do something again before the end of the year. The beautiful thing about doing it virtually is we can invite people from additional locations. We welcome your feedback in the chat or directly, and obviously we'll also be putting a recording up on YouTube for those who've missed it, who would like to hear the great tips shared by Greg, John, Peter and myself. So thank you. Anything else you want to close off with, Peter?
Well, look, I'm happy to say thank you everybody for coming or joining us. I think we'll try and do another one pre-Christmas. This was sort of our mid-year one, and it sort of happened by demand. A few people said, hey, we haven't had the consultants lunch. What are you going to do about it? So we've done something about it. So I guess we'll try and do one before Christmas, or we may be allowed to have our consultants lunch again, but I'm probably being overly optimistic. But look, it's something we do twice a year. It's just a group of friends these days that sort of get together and have a chat. And we're going to keep inviting. We invite about 150 people, get invites from Spectrum Analysis. We'll make sure everyone here is added onto the list, and it's just at any stage in the future, we'd love to see you personally, you know, see where it all goes. So look, thank you so much for coming, and happy if Sue wants to just break us up into little groups